Back by popular demand from episode 63, our special guest today is a naturopathic physician, Dr. Aimée Gould Shunney. And we're very happy to have her back. Dr. Shunney has been in private practice since 2001. She's currently at Santa Cruz Integrative Medicine in Santa Cruz, California. She blends a conventional medical diagnosis and treatment with the use of natural therapeutics like dietary and lifestyle counseling, nutritional supplements, and herbal medicine. Dr. Aimée specializes in women's health, bioidentical hormone balancing, sexual medicine, and functional digestive issues. In addition to seeing patients, Dr. Aimée has been an educator and medical advisor to various companies in the natural products industry since 2011. You can learn a little bit more about her at drshunney.com. That's DRSHUNNEY.com. Dr. Aimée, welcome back to the show. Very nice to have you.
Oh, thanks. It's so good to be back. I had so much fun last time.
Yeah. Can you believe that it really doesn't seem like it's been about 13 weeks, right? About 3 months.
Yeah, because it was Mother's Day.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Does it seem
Amazing.
like it's been that
Time
long?
Flies.
Right. Time flies. That's about how long it takes to get an appointment with you, too, right? It's about 3 months.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, just kidding. But if you go to Dr. Shunney's website, drshunney.com, and look at the reviews, she really has made some fantastic changes in people's lives. So you definitely want to get on her website and take a look at that. But today, we definitely want to use your time wisely. And we've heard you speak about stress. You've talked a little bit about it on our show before, and you've spoken about it before. I really love this topic and the way you cover it, and especially how CBD plays a role in our response to stress. And I want to start this off with a definition, really, because what is stress?
Right. It's the gazillion-dollar question, right? And we bandy that word about all over the place. Manage your stress, reduce your stress, stressors, you're stressing me out. But what does it really mean? So in the 1930s, actually, the term was coined by a Canadian-Hungarian endocrinologist named Dr. Hans Selye, and he identified the term stress when he would observe rats in his laboratory and how they would respond to what he called chronic noxious stimuli. And he found that they had some very consistent types of symptoms. And so what he decided was that when you provided something, in this case negative, that caused an organism, in that case it was a rat, but we're organisms too, right? When you provide something that makes an organism need to adapt, that certain things will happen that are predictable. And he went on to say that stress, that thing that causes us to have to adapt somehow, even though in his lab he observed it with something that was noxious or bad, in reality it doesn't have to be bad. That stress is just simply something that makes our organisms, our bodies, have to jog, have to flex, have to adapt to the situation. So it's this incredible capacity that we have. We are having to do it all the time. But I think that in our common language, the term stress has become a really negative term. And I actually think it's super important for us to remember as we start to talk about stress that stress doesn't have to be bad or good. It is just simply something that we have to respond to in our environment. And so the more resilient we are to be able to do that, the healthier we are, the happier we're going to be. As we've learned maybe more than ever in our lifetime in the last year and a half, the ability to adapt and be resilient is crucial for survival.
So it sounds like stress is something that our bodies absolutely need, like it's essential in our lives.
It's essential, and we are wired to be able to manage it, right? And if you look at some of the surveys about things that cause the biggest stress response, and often, by the way, and we'll talk about this as we go, but the way that we measure that, there are organs in our body that make hormones and chemicals to help us manage stress. So we we measure those hormones to see what causes big stress responses. And obviously, you can imagine lots of terrible things do, but some of the biggest stressors that we encounter are things like getting married, getting a new job, moving. Now, these are things that, hopefully at least with getting married are positive things that are happening to us, right? But they're incredibly stressful events. So, yeah, it happens to us. It is part of life. It is actually crucial. There's a sweet spot with stress where it keeps us motivated and it keeps us productive. Without any stress, we kind of stop reacting, responding, motivating, producing. So we need a certain amount of it, but too much of it runs us ragged in the wrong direction and eventually, will exhaust us and be debilitating.
Yeah, so when you find yourself at the doctor's and, everything's been fine so far, but you get to that point where you get reports back or some data that shows, hey, things are progressing in a way that's not. Maybe you have some disease diagnosis or some sort of illness. And then they suggest, hey, stress can be a cause of this. Can you make the connection between, obviously there's good, bad, and bad stress, but the bad stress that's causing these problems, can you connect that for us?
To disease states?
Or just to the bad stress, what's the problem with, what happens in the body when we get the stress that the doctors are saying, hey, you need to manage this stress better?
Yeah, well, immediately when we get a stress message from our brain, that the saber-toothed tiger is coming and we better kick it down the plane and find a tree to hop up into, when those messages come, the body actually makes chemicals that are anti-inflammatory and reduce pain and elevate our mood and manage our focus and dilate our pupils and dilate our airways and shunt all the blood to our periphery so we can run further, faster, farther, and get up into that tree. The problem is the chronic persistent stress, right? We're designed from an evolutionary perspective to have all of those things happen so we make it to the tree, get up there, saber-toothed tiger circles around a few times and then decides it's going to go get lunch somewhere else. We come down from the tree. Modern society, it's like we're in the tree a lot of the time for a prolonged period of time. And some of those chemical messages I mentioned start to go in the other direction. So we actually start to get that anti-inflammatory effect wears off, and we start to actually get more inflammation in our body. So more of a pro-inflammatory chemical environment in our body.
So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the pain that we kind of didn't feel as much when we were sprinting starts to get worse. So we have more pain. So more inflammation, more pain. Our mood tanks. All of that energy that we were shunting into our periphery can make our digestion worse because when you're in that sympathetic fight or flight, right, nothing's happening for the rest and digest, which is the other part of your nervous system. So we can really get out of balance, and it can contribute to any kind of digestive issue. And probably what's most important when you consider the things that tend to kill us in this country, any inflammatory issue, right? So, the top 3 causes of death in this country, which are heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, all have inflammatory components at their root. So, when we are under chronic stress, we are pushing the probability that we could end up with any of those chronic illnesses down the road, not to mention anxiety and depression and fatigue. So, stress can really be behind, frankly, a huge majority of the things that ail us. And when you go to your doctor and that comes up, let's face it, they don't have much for you, How's your stress? Manage your stress.
So it sounds like it's not stress that actually kills us. It seems like it's the reaction to stress and the way that our body sometimes handles that stress. And so on that note, since stress isn't the worst thing in the world, how do we get people to change their perceptions about stress?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think if you start by educating people, right, you start by saying, okay, so just remember that these things are stressful, but a lot of the time what can make it really damaging is when we attach an emotional response to that stress that we're feeling, or I am stressed out and this is bad. And so we constantly talk to people about things like meditation, mindfulness, taking breaks from their work, taking breaks from the news, getting outside into nature, really watching their isolation levels and making sure they're out and connecting, because these are the things that are going to help people take that stress that's happening and not attach it to something so negative and manage it better.
Dr. Shunney, I know you're a hip-hop fan like we are. Mm-hmm. Do you know what, what artist or group remade that song?
Sampled it
to make a remake of that song.
I don't. But it's got such a good hook.
It does. It's NWA.
Dre.
And that's right. And
nice.
Sorry, you lost on that one, but you know.
Yeah, well, it's all right.
That's all right. You got a lot of other good information in that brain. There's no room for that stuff in there. But
you got that right.
Anyway, you were just explaining how we can change, our response to stress, and how do you describe the process of really the perception of stress in the body?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know that I can give it's funny because what you said previously about it's not the stress that kills you, it's how you react to it. That was actually Dr. Selye who created the term stress. He actually also went and said that about stress. So he also recognized that different people...
Dr. Shunney, we're getting a little bit of static.
Oh.
Noah, can you fix this over here? Come on.
Is that any better?
Yes, that is better.
Thank you.
Must be
really?
that right hand. Yeah.
Don't go over here. The router's that way. So.
Dr. Selyak, I think you were saying.
So Dr. Selye, he actually said it's not the stress that kills you, it's how you react to it. So, I mean, he recognized, even back then, that perception was a huge thing. And so it's so fascinating how each of us kind of comes into the world. We have our own genetic makeup. We have our own experiences of childhood and adulthood, things that we're exposed to by, good or bad luck. The family that we are born into, who we watch to see how they handle their stress. I mean, all of these things kind of contribute to how we then end up reacting to our stress. So for some people, they're starting a few steps behind to try to figure out, how to manage these things that happen to them. And it really, I think, it takes somebody, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a teacher, a pastor, a friend, a family member, to actually make somebody, help somebody be aware that they do have a certain amount of power and control over how they respond to the things that happen to them in their life. And for some people, that's a lot easier to find that feeling of control and agency than others. So much of it is based on our circumstances and what we've been exposed to and what our resources are. So, what I try to do with every patient is just start by talking to them about what it is that's going on in their lives that they find stressful to them, right? This is subjective. It's not for me to decide what's stressful to you. It's up to you. So to tell me, and then sometimes I try to talk them through some simple reframing exercises, like, is there another way that we can look at this? When you start to feel like that, what sensations do you feel in your body? Well, my chest gets tight, or my stomach starts to hurt, or my head gets fuzzy. Okay, well, can we maybe not attach a whole bunch of negative things to those physical sensations? Can we maybe lean into them a little bit, not resist them, breathe, just so it sounds kind of rudimentary and simplistic, perhaps, but I think that these things are so crucial because for many of us, we have to relearn how to not go from 0 to 60 in a second, right? And, of course, that's where we start to get into things like CBD and other tools. I mean, yes, meditation, mindfulness, get outside, connect, all of that. But when there are actually biological tools that we can use to help us get there as well, but it does all start right here. The brain is so powerful.
Tell us about that. Tell us about this, because you educated us about this HPA Axis function.
Yeah.
Tell us about
that. Just to throw some more alphabet soup at your listeners.
Sure, we need more.
So HPA Axis, this stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So the hypothalamus is located in your brain, as is the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is part of a group of structures that together are called the limbic system. The limbic system is responsible for every one of your emotions, every one of your basic instincts. So this limbic system is the key to our emotional life, and our hypothalamus is a big part of it. You might have heard of other things like the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and there's several structures. But in this case, with the HPA, we'll start with the H, which is the hypothalamus. Right? This is kind of the seat of that sympathetic nervous system where input comes in and the brain perceives that there is a stressor. There is something that we need to respond to. The hypothalamus, and granted, this is a simplistic version for any of my biochemistry geeks that happen to be listening. So, but we all need to understand this. So the hypothalamus makes chemicals that send signals to the pituitary gland to make chemicals to send signals to all of our endocrine organs, including the adrenals. What are your adrenals? There's 2 of them. They sit on your back, and they're on top of your kidneys. They're They have some impact on kidneys, but they're completely separate, a separate organ. That's where they live, in the back. And the adrenals make cortisol, adrenaline, also called epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So all of our major stress hormones are made by the adrenals, and they're made in response to this cascade that started at the hypothalamus, went to the pituitary, and then went to the adrenals. The adrenals make that cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Like I said earlier, your pupils dilate, your lungs can take in more air, you get more blood in your arms and legs so you can run, right? Mood's high, focus is good, all that great stuff happens there. When that cortisol and epinephrine start to come up, that sends a negative feedback signal to the hypothalamus that says, hey, we're good, we got it covered. And then the hypothalamus stops sending those signals that started that in the first place, right? That's called a negative feedback loop.
Gotcha. So your brain says, hey, we have a problem here. And then it sends it down to the body, and then the body responds and says, all right, we're good, we got it. And it sends it back up, and then everything is balanced and good to go, right? That's a proper function, right?
Exactly. You're up in the tree, the saber-toothed tiger gets bored and leaves and goes find lunch somewhere else, right? But, as you can imagine, when this loop is running all day, every day.
Yeah, when we're stuck up in that tree, or when there's just constant messages of concern, and we didn't mention this earlier, but and I bring this up because it's a personal problem for me, and maybe other people have it too. It's not even a mental stress; it could be stress from something that we might be eating that's wrong. So it's not even the body perceives stress, for many different things. It could be the plastic in our water.
No, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, anything that makes you adapt. So it can be something that you don't know or can't see, like a response to a food or an environmental component.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that point is that when you're in this fear state, there's a lot of things that keep you there, and it may be things that go below the radar that you're not even looking for. So the problems.
I'm cold. I'm hot. I'm hungry. So, you try to talk to people about managing their stress when they're cold or hot or hungry. Mm. You've got a problem, right? Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You remember that? Like, it's quite a privilege to be able to sit here and talk about stress.
So are you saying it wears out? Is that the problem? Like, when you stay in this state, like what happens?
Oh, so what happens is you lose this beautiful orchestrated feedback loop, right? So for a while, the body compensates as best as it can. Okay, more cortisol, more adrenaline. Okay, I can do that. And what we used to say when I first got out of school 20 years ago, we would say that eventually the adrenals can't keep up supply with demand, and they become fatigued or exhausted. We used to call this adrenal fatigue or adrenal exhaustion. And that's a really helpful way to think about it. But we've amended that language somewhat over the years because the adrenals actually do not become fatigued or exhausted. What happens is the feedback loop breaks down and stops listening. It's a little bit like the little boy who called wolf. The adrenals lose their sensitivity to those messages. So what often happens is, we'll have a certain amount of time where the body's trying to compensate and all these stress hormones go high. Now we're getting more inflamed. We're not managing our blood sugar as well. We're more likely to see high blood pressure, high blood sugar. We're starting to get anxious. Sleep might be breaking down. All of these things are happening with prolonged elevated stress hormones. Then eventually that feedback loop becomes less functional. And now our levels start to drop.
So speaking of
fatigued, we gain weight.
And speaking of systems that also help control your body's let's call it homeostasis. Let's dive into the endocannabinoid system because we've talked a lot about that subject. What role does the endocannabinoid system play in this?
So again, keeping with our alphabet soup theme, we've got CBD, HPA, and the ECS, right? The endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is actually an incredible gatekeeper for the HPA axis. If you think about some of the things that you've shared with your listeners about how amazing the endocannabinoid system is, its ability to keep us balanced, which is also a fancy word, homeostasis is a fancy word for that, to decrease inflammation, all of those things. The endocannabinoid system fits in perfectly here. So just to remind everybody, right, your endocannabinoid system consists of cannabis-like compounds that we make ourselves, right? So anandamide and 2-AG are the ones you hear about the most. And then we've got two different types of cannabinoid receptors that are located throughout the body, and of course the enzymes that produce and degrade those endocannabinoids. That's our endocannabinoid system. And what we've learned is that the tone or the balance of that system seems to be very predictive of someone's stress response and even their own perception of anxiety. So we find, for example, that when people have higher levels of circulating endocannabinoids, so your anandamide and your 2-AG are up where they should be, that when you are exposed to a stressor, you are going to have a healthier uptick of your stress hormones, and you're going to come back to baseline faster. Whereas if you have lower levels of those circulating endocannabinoids, that what will happen is that you will actually have a much bigger, exaggerated kind of neuroendocrine response to that stress, and it takes you longer to get back to that baseline, which is crucial for keeping that feedback loop intact, right? We've also learned that higher levels of circulating endocannabinoids in studies do things like that. They are predictive of people having less anxiety, even of being less vulnerable to PTSD. So the health of your endocannabinoid system is a preventive. It helps to keep you less vulnerable to acute emotional states like anxiety and PTSD because it keeps you more balanced. It's the homeostasis factor. So the ECS and the things we can do to balance and support it are crucial to the health of the HPA axis.
Yeah, and you've made that so clear, and I love the way you describe it. And this sort of enters the role of CBD here and the phytocannabinoids, the endocannabinoids being what's created in the body, and phytocannabinoids from this magical plant. Can you tell us a little bit about how that fits into this equation and the balancing of your endocannabinoid system?
Yeah, so, we know that CBD has over 65 different defined mechanisms of action, so there's a lot that it does. But certainly, if you look at the research, particularly the human research and what we do have, what we see over and over again about one of the main ways that CBD is supportive is that it helps to keep our endocannabinoids in circulation longer. It helps to create better endocannabinoid tone. So if you take CBD, this phytocannabinoid from plants, it comes in and it acts in such a way within, not only in the CB receptors, but in the cannabinoid receptors, but also in other types of receptors in the body, which can give similar kinds of calming, mood stabilizing effects. And it helps to keep that endocannabinoid system more balanced. So again, CBD can help make sure that we're primed to not be as vulnerable against those acute emotional states like anxiety and PTSD that the studies show, and that when we do have a stress response, it's going to be healthier, it's not going to be exaggerated, and probably the most important, we're going to come back to baseline faster. And I have to say that both my own experience and my patients' experience that I hear over and over again is, I'm just not as reactive as I used to be. And that's it. That's the key. It's right there. You're not as reactive because you're more balanced. It's a healthier state to be in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That and I love the way you say that too. That the cannabinoids from the plant go in not just to complement it, but they also help the natural endocannabinoids live longer, and it actually helps your body heal itself naturally without even actually adding things to it. That's a really interesting way to put in that. We're coming to the end of our time together, unfortunately, today, but we wanted you all to know that Dr. Aimée Shunney is a naturopathic doctor in Santa Cruz, California. She does offer telemedicine appointments to get you on the right track. Go to drshunney.com. That's DRSHUNNEY.com to schedule an appointment. Dr. Shunney, we have some questions here, but before I have one last one for you. You added CBD to your practice around 5 years ago or so. And since you've added CBD to your practice, obviously you have a long history of helping patients before CBD entered. How would you describe, and what have you noticed since then?
I mean, I'm still amazed at the game changer that CBD has created in my practice for, I would say the things that I see it the most for in my practice are anxiety and stress response, sleep, and then also pain and inflammation. And like you said, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, so, 5.5 of it with CBD, the rest without. And I find that while I've so many plants and herbs and nutraceuticals that I love and use regularly, that CBD just it acts faster in a more profound way for those conditions that I just listed than anything else that I've personally worked with before. So it's been a real game changer for my practice.
That's great, Dr. Shunney. And so we have a listener question here, which is a pretty common question that we get here and there. And the question is, I'm considering taking CBD and I'm concerned about its interaction with any medications. So what do you typically tell your patients there?
Well, in a perfect world, I would say absolutely. There's a small possibility you should check with your doctor. But then, of course, if I say that, I also have to know that chances are their doctor's going to have no clue, unfortunately. So, what I would say is that while there is a chance, CBD is metabolized down the same pathway in the body that metabolizes the vast majority of pharmaceuticals. I would say that what we've actually seen in clinical practice and in studies is small. The exception would be with some anti-epileptic medications, and of course also Coumadin and blood thinners. And newsflash, anything you take and eat can interfere with your Coumadin and blood thinners. So your doctor always needs to know when you add something, even if it's a new diet, a new dietary strategy, or a new supplement when you're on those meds. Other than that, there's a lot of synergy with certain pathways. So if you're taking anti-anxiety meds, sleep meds, antidepressants, and then you're trying to use CBD for that, you've got to be careful. So I would say do it with somebody, with a provider or, someone you trust, a trusted consultant that can help you kind of navigate what's happening. Start low, go slow, and you really shouldn't get in much trouble. I have found CBD to play very well even with other medications.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Appreciate that. We have another listener here, and this is from one of our anxious listeners. She says, Dr. Shunney, you've convinced me I'm going to try CBD. How much do I take?
So here's the thing. You have to go into it with beginner's mind and an open brain to the idea that you're going to have to find the sweet spot for you, that we're all a little different. What it takes to balance my endocannabinoid system to provide that kind of calming effect is different than what it takes to do it for you, right? So what I would do, I have found that incredibly low doses of CBD can actually be very helpful for anxiety. So I would say even starting with 3 to 5 milligrams of CBD in a full spectrum hemp extract would be a really easy place to start. And it's quite fast acting. So if you don't notice a difference in, say, 15, 20 minutes if you're taking a liquid, or 45 to 60 minutes if you're taking a capsule, that's a pretty good sign that you can slowly start to titrate up on your dose. Worst thing that I usually see with these kinds of doses, if you take too much, is you get sleepy. So if you're worried about that, maybe don't do it when you're running out to do carpool, or you've got an important meeting, or you're about to do an important thing for your job.
Yeah, until you know what it does with your body.
Yeah, exactly. So that you can experiment. But usually, if you start low, 3 to 5 milligrams if anxiety is the issue, and then I would say take it at the time of day when your anxiety is the worst. So if your anxiety is worse at night, take it then. If it's daytime anxiety, take it in the morning. And for a while, take it every day in the morning to you're trying to wear some new grooves in your nervous system, in your stress response, right? And then as you start to see some success, you can start to pull back and even use it on more like an as-needed basis.
So certainly taking it orally can help with stress. What about topically? Because people have that question all the time. Can applying it topically help?
It's a great question. I think it can. I mean, there's no data to support this, but I would say that anecdotal data, and certainly what I've seen in my practice, of course, some of it's going to get into your bloodstream, right? All those incredible cannabinoids and terpenes in the full spectrum hemp are actually great at driving things in through the skin and into the bloodstream. So you're going to get some CBD in the bloodstream, and I often tell people, particularly if they're nervous at first, take some balm or some roll-on or something like that, put it at the bottoms of their feet or on their wrists, put their feet up, relax a little bit, and I think a lot of people find that to really support a state of relaxation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Dr. Shunney, thank you so much for being here today and giving us some great advice on dealing with stress and how we can use hemp and CBD. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. It's so good to talk with you guys.
Now, everyone, go to drshunney.com. That's www.drshunney.com, and follow up with Dr. Shunney for some more information.